welcome to the Premier Football Podcast. Again, special guest Sean. I'm joined by the PFP stalwarts and veterans, Rafe and Joe, and we have a special guest today, all the way from Newcastle, Conor Jennings. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here, lads.
Yeah, delighted to have you, Conor. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. It's great to be back.
That's quite a bit of development without any football really being played over the Premier League since we last spoke. We may as well jump straight in. Today we had the Premier League vote on Project Return, very aptly named. So basically unanimous votes to return to training tomorrow. Joe, what's the thoughts for phase one kicking off?
Yeah, I suppose not surprised. I thought there might be a little bit more of a fuss maybe from teams down the bottom end of the table who would prefer to have the season finished kind of between 14th and 16th kind of thing, but not overly surprised. And it'll just be interesting to see how much football they can fit in, what they're going to have to do. I think the plan was to originally start back matches on June 12th. Obviously that's 4 weeks away, something like that. They might have to push that back a little bit. What's going to happen in the UK in terms of the coronavirus? Is there going to be any increase in cases? In which case they might have to scrap the plans that they've made. If a footballer or a coach or a member of staff at a club catches it, what are they going to have to do? There are a lot of questions, and it's obviously it's not unexpected, but it's ambitious to be trying to fit it in such a short space of time.
I think they'll probably have to push came out saying June 12th was too ambitious. He's already said that over the weekend. But they voted on it today anyway, so phase one, they're back training. Just for comparison, like Germany came back April 8th for training, and they only played this weekend, just gone May 15th, 16th.
Yeah, so they had 6 weeks.
Over a month of training.
Yeah. No, they'll have to push it. The thing is, if it gets pushed back to late June or early July, where does that leave us? It's like 10 games that we have to play. It just seems like I don't know if it's doable. And then you have to think about European competitions in pre-season and starting next season and what's going to happen. There are a lot of unanswered questions.
They might have to be scrapped.
Exactly, yeah. A lot of unanswered questions. So it'll be interesting to see how the situation develops.
Yeah, and speaking of unanswered questions, so phase one has been voted in. Phase 2 and 3, Troy Deeney came out saying that it's all well and good. People are happy to go back to phase 1, but phase 2 and 3, they're not answering questions about testing. He's come out saying about how black and mixed race are more susceptible to COVID. He's vented frustrations on it. Aguero's vented frustrations on it. Abraham has said his father suffers from asthma, so he wasn't keen on even going back for the contact training. And then Grant Hanley, Norwich captain, his wife is pregnant. She's expecting a baby in July, I think, so pretty soon. And he's not happy about even contact training. So, where do they go from there? Because officials came out today saying people who don't want to train or play shouldn't be paid.
Yeah, well, look, sadly, there are people all over the world in all developed countries that are being forced to work at the moment. And several of those industries are not essential. I mean, like there were hardware stores reopened again today in Dublin. And they're not essential because we live without them for 9 weeks. There was no need for them to open today. And I'm sure all of the staff in Woody's around the corner or whatever all have the family members at home and, people that are vulnerable, and everybody knows someone that's vulnerable. And as much as people can say, look, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to go and do this. That's absolutely fine. That is your choice not to go to work. But I really don't see why, some people have to go to work and end up getting paid less than what the social welfare equivalent over here would have been for the COVID stuff if their job is back going again. Whereas people that earn hundreds of thousands of pounds every week can afford to say, no, actually, I'm not bothered going to work, but then get upset when people suggest maybe taking some of that money away from them.
On that, Conor, were you following that about club officials saying they shouldn't be paid?
Yeah, I was. It's an interesting one, and I think realistically, if the clubs are providing a safe environment for the players to train in, I know like Liverpool have been doing a lot of just individual training with fitness coaches and sort of basic technical training for players. So if they're creating a safe environment and they're asking the players to return to work, which it is for them, it's their job, then I think it's pretty reasonable not to pay them. I think if any of us were asked to return to our jobs and that was a safe environment and we refused to, I think a lot of, most companies would probably refuse to pay us fully at least as well, So yeah. It's not black and white.
I did hear
to be applied.
I did hear Andros Townsend come out today and say that if he was asked to go back to work, he's of the opinion that QPR is the safest workplace in the UK. Or not QPR, really? Sorry, Crystal Palace are the safest workplace in the UK from all of the discussions that they've had from the club, all of the documents that they've got, all of the planning that's gone in place behind the club. He feels super assured as club captain that it is genuinely that football clubs are the safest place to be if you're going to be working anywhere in the UK right now.
Yeah, like they've made it clear, like the plans are like there's 3 car parking spaces between the designated spots for players when they come to training. They're supposed to arrive at kind of staggered out times. Everything's getting, I don't know if you've seen any pictures going around online, like the lockers, the balls, everything's being sprayed heavily with disinfectant. Let's say it smells either awful or incredible, depending if you like it.
It's probably also worth remembering that compared to the average person, they have access to testing every day. Yeah. So, that's also another factor to consider. So, yeah,
I think so the Premier League are paying for all testing in clubs. There's no taxpayer money going on the private testing they're doing. I think they get at least 2 tests a week.
Interesting.
And then they'll move it on for phase 2 and 3.
Do you know they're only just going to introduce testing in the Championship? They haven't even started yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
I read that today. Yeah, they haven't even done any. And that kind of just, I think that's a bit of a disgrace, isn't it? I think all football, certainly in terms of professional football in every country, should be united and they should be afforded the same treatment throughout the leagues, rather than having Premier League clubs being tested.
UK is an interesting entity though, because the EFL governs Championship down to League 2, and they might have been waiting to see what happens. But then Norwich came out last week saying, well, if no one goes up via playing games, no one should go down and be replaced by them just on merit. It's a pretty smooth move by Norwich, who we've tipped heavily to go down multiple times on stage.
Norwich would say that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I think that the coronavirus is their only chance of staying up, barring some bizarre run of form that would be unexpected.
Haven't the FA said that they will use their powers as such to promote and relegate teams no matter what at this stage, though?
Yeah. Now, what else we saw today was Celtic getting declared champions up in Scotland. And as a result, Hearts have actually been relegated. And already there's talk of them threatening legal action, which you'd fully expect from Premier League teams. It's far more money on the line.
Yeah.
Norwich, we keep saying they're done, but they are only 6 points off safety.
And let's not forget the position that Leicester City were in the season before they went on to actually win the Premier League, where at this stage of the season they were all but relegated, before they went on that outrageous run over the last.
One of the great escapes, yeah, absolutely.
They survived on the last day, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
West Brom have done it many a time as well,
West Brom, the greatest relegation battle of all time. Kieran Richardson and Brian Robson.
Fulham under Roy Hodgson, when he took over mid-season, they were dead and buried, and they came back and got out by the skin of their teeth on the last day. It's doable. Of course it is. We've seen great escapes in the past.
But it's just, yeah.
When you look how quickly this season, how quickly Southampton turned everything around.
Yeah. Good point.
And the loss was the best thing that ever happened to them. They just picked it up from there and kicked on.
Yeah.
Because I think the difficult thing that the Premier League faces at the moment is that, bar Liverpool with first place, everything else is up for grabs in terms of European qualification. I think everybody wants to see what's going to happen with Sheffield United. It'd be terrible for them to miss out on Europe after this season.
Wolves have been one of the best stories.
Wolves have been fantastic, and then you've got no team is technically relegated at the moment yet. So 10 games is a long time to go. So it's very difficult.
The easy thing is giving Liverpool the title. It's all but done.
Yeah,
You just can't relegate someone. I don't see how they can work that out. I think that's really the main issue for pushing so hard on this return.
Absolutely.
Okay, but then I was going to say, so we saw Scotland, like if they were to apply it now, the relegation, like are they going to use
They can't and they won't, and they're not planning on. I mean, that's why they've gone to such lengths to, under any form, get football back, because they totally understand the repercussions of what would happen if they were to curtail it now. And it wouldn't even just be this season and next season, like the knock-on effect that we'd see over the coming seasons of teams suing and teams running out of money and teams having to sell their players. And it's a butterfly effect that will totally alter the course of history if it doesn't get finished. And whether or not it's for the better or for the worse, like we might see some fantastic teams come up as a result, and we might get to see players we wouldn't have seen, but we could, for the supporters of clubs that are around the bottom of the Premier League, you can totally understand the fears that they have about sliding down into the Championship with massive overheads from legal battles and them getting dragged out. And you can totally understand frustrations.
Oh yeah, 100%. So it's been touted and thrown out there, 2 teams up from the Championship and don't relegate someone?
Yeah, I'd be in favour of that. If they had to curtail something, if they had to curtail the season, I would definitely be in favour of bringing the 2 top Championship teams that do have a relatively comfortable lead at the top up, not promoting any people.
Is it still Leeds and West Brom?
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
West Brom, but Fulham are only, I want to say, either 4 or 5 points back.
Yeah, they are, but they're still 4 or 5 points.
It's a winner. It's a winner 2 away. Yeah.
Yeah, and they wouldn't even be guaranteed to come up if they finished where they are now. They can still go down as well as up. Like finishing 3rd in the Championship is by no means a guarantee of coming up.
No, I just would be thinking like if they're 3rd at the moment, they probably think, oh, we could push on for automatic.
Yeah, but I don't think they'd have grounds for a lawsuit though, because nothing's being taken away from them per se. Like,
a playoff spot that's the only thing that they've reduced the number of teams going up,
and that's a lottery anyway.
To 2.
Yeah.
It is a lottery, but that's the only corner they have to fight on it. It's not much.
No, it's not. But it's the financial implications for the clubs probably in the Championship, who generally overspend or overstretch themselves, and now they're going to have serious cash flow problems. Probably the likes of Fulham, who spend big time on wages and are expecting to go up again, are going to miss out on a potential cash windfall there. So I think the financial implications will be far more than just Premier League clubs who are overstretching themselves as well.
This is the thing. And definitely a very good point, Conor. And I would say that the clubs that are going to suffer the most are the ones further down the leagues. It's not going to be the Premier League clubs who have the capital there to survive without an income for months, if not a year, if not longer in the cases of the wealthier clubs. The clubs in the Championship, League 1, League 2,
for entertainment's sake, I desperately hope that there is a Netflix cameraman living with the Sunderland chairman. Is
it still your man? What's he called? Charlie. Is it still Charlie? Are they still the owners? Do any of you know?
I think the marketing guy, Charlie, stepped down, but I think the other guy who was still head honcho was still honcho at the start of the season.
Yeah.
But even because we mentioned up there, League 2, obviously they voted and ended the season on the weekend. Salford, Gary Neville, all the big money backing that Salford have, straight away they released I think 15 players. Wow. Aaron Gibson was one of them. Pretty much day after that vote went through. It's tight down there. They are living on a shoestring. A lot of teams.
Well, a lot of clubs already, before this crisis, were facing grave financial difficulty, weren't they? So if you take into account this, then unfortunately, I think a lot of clubs are probably going to go under. And then
we saw with Bury and then Bolton this season. So Bury gone, Bolton 12-point deduction to start off with because of financial trouble.
Yeah, so I think for a long time, these the financial the gulf in financial muscle between the Premier League and the top tier of the Championship and the rest of the football pyramid has been, shocking, to be honest, and has led to massive problems and clubs going bust. But now I think football is really going to have a wake-up call, unfortunately. But maybe
do you think this could be? Do you think this could be the watershed moment for spending in football?
It's as close as it's ever going to get, Rafe. I think. I think if this doesn't do it, I don't think it will ever happen. But I think this is potentially the only, or the biggest chance football has to financially restructure itself.
It has to.
An idea being touted around at the weekend was salary caps in EFL clubs, so Championship to League Two.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that was also mentioned was the kind of reviewing of parachute payments to relegated clubs from the Premier League in particular. They was saying that they've investigated it, and it causes mass sort of wage inflation because clubs below the relegated clubs have to spend more to attract players with wages. So I think that creates a race to the bottom, doesn't it?
The other point about kind of for the lower league teams, that's going to link in with the next thing I'm talking about. Their gate receipts are so important to them at the lower league. You're not getting TV sponsorship. You're not getting the attention that the big Premier League teams get. But now with COVID-19 spreading into next year, there's talk fans won't be able to go to matches. So the Bundesliga returned on the weekend we mentioned earlier, up behind closed doors. I watched the first half of Dortmund and Schalke, and it just felt like a friendly match. Even though that's like a big derby in Germany. They're only something like 15 miles apart. It didn't really feel like much. I stopped watching it. It was 2-0. Like, okay, yeah, whatever. But, so the gates for lower league teams, and then German football not coming back with fans, like it's not football.
You got to remember, sorry, Joe, there have been breaks in football before. Like you go back to maybe World War II, I think was the last time there was a break in football. They did pause for 3 years?
Yeah, true.
I'm not 3-4 years, and it did resume when life kind of resumed afterwards. There have been periods where people have had to go without football, and they've done other things in the meantime. Because I know that football is obviously more than people kicking a ball around on the pitch, like.
Yeah, it is. I mean, those clubs survived, but the money invested in the game, I mean, incomparable to what it is today.
And now that money's not there.
Yeah, it's frightening. Where those clubs going to get their money from? As you said, Sean, the gate receipts are a massive part of it. So but with so many Premier League clubs, they could play behind closed doors forever, and they financially would get by no problem.
Yeah, they'd get the TV deals, but it's the lower teams wouldn't.
That's it. So I think whether we like it or not, like the FA are going to have to, it'd be almost like bailing out clubs or trying.
I think you've got three options if you want to keep the clubs going. You've either got to start giving them money either from within football. The FA have got to start either trying to bail them out, like you were saying, and keep them alive. The government have got to bail them out and keep them alive because they're the ones putting restrictions on the movement of people. Or you start opening the stadium to small numbers of fans and only selling seats that are 2 meters apart, like you said, with car spaces. And you have a limited capacity in the grounds, which obviously wouldn't be as much as have been coming in before. But if you have people sitting 2 meters apart in the ground, in theory, it's the same as them sitting 2 meters apart somewhere else.
But you couldn't fill it. Could you stream every game live and charge a pay-per-view fee to watch it?
That's not a bad idea.
The cost of implementing that for the lower teams, though, you're going to have your own camera in with staff. Are you sure the uptake is going to be there?
The thing about football in the lower leagues is that, like I was saying, it's not all about the football on the pitch. It's a much more community-based thing where you get together with the lads, you have a couple of drinks beforehand, you go in, you watch the local team, you go get a curry afterwards, and you go home, and that's your Friday night, and that's what you always do on Fridays. Like, it's a social thing, it's a ritual thing. You go and you see it, and then that's what you talk about during the week and stuff. The actual lads kicking a ball around on the pitch is almost second to the experience for a lot of the smaller teams. Like, they don't have global followings for a reason, because the standard of what you're watching isn't as aesthetically pleasing as it is at higher levels.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's going to pay €10 to watch fucking Wednesday, watch Accrington Stanley play against Bury. Like, it's just not going to happen.
I'm just saying it's a way to try to think about going about getting some sort of income for these clubs. And of course, we wouldn't do that, but who's to say that it's not like those games are on TV anyway. I mean, a League One, League Two club might get 1 or 2 televised games a year max.
Yeah,
something like that. It's not like they're going to have access to their games anyway. It's not like they can go and see every away game. So it would be an opportunity for them to be able to actually keep up with what was happening with their team. So I think that there probably would be an appetite to do that.
I think that's realistic. I mean, do you think, Joe and Rafe and Sean, like in terms of the ideas that we're discussing, we're floating here, this is all an attempt to keep the game in the Football League professional? But do you think there might simply be no choice but to almost mimic like what the Republic of Ireland have with the sort of Premier Division and First Division, where it's that blend of professional and semi-pro clubs? You know, do you think a lot of clubs are going to have to de-professionalize as such?
Oh my God, that is a huge. The thing is that there are some really big clubs in. Yeah. Sunderland are in League One. Sunderland have 6 league titles. I know not recently, but still 6 league titles. They have a 50,000 seater stadium there. It's a city of 150,000 people, and it's the only football club there. So it's an institution in itself, and they're not alone in that. You have Blackburn Rovers down in the Championship, Leeds in the Championship. You know, I don't know how many. There are former Premier League clubs everywhere, scattered down in the Championship, League One and League Two. If you browse through and look at the tables there, you'll recognise clubs.
Yeah, you'll find your Swindons and your
Oldhams and your Bradfords and your Charltons and Coventries and Ipswich. There are clubs with 25,000 to 40,000 seater stadiums littered in the Football League. So I think that it's just such a.
They couldn't do it because for their long-term future, I don't think they'd survive. You wouldn't then be able to attract anyone because you couldn't offer what someone else offers. I think salary cap.
The salary cap, unless all of football takes a step backwards from its ridiculous wages. Like, you know what I mean? You can be if you consider yourself a well-paid professional if you're earning a couple of $100,000 a year in normal life. You know, top surgeons take in a couple of $100,000 a year.
A judge
footballers don't need a couple of $100,000 a week. Like,
a judge would be considered like a top profession, and they would earn €300,000 a year in Ireland. Yeah. And like they would be able to send their kids to all the best schools and universities and everything, and keep a couple of homes and stuff. So it's
if you were making €40,000 a year, you would consider yourself full time.
Yeah,
in that job. Yeah. So if you were to pay a League One or a Championship footballer £40,000 to £60,000 a year, I
think in League One they would be on about that.
Or Championship players certainly are.
Championship would be more. Yeah, I think League One is I think the average wage in League One is about 50-60k, something like that.
So from one extreme to the other, teams struggling for money. There's a team who look like they won't be struggling for money for a while. And we've brought on a season ticket holder and no less expert to discuss it. Conor, what do you make of the potential bid that has come in to take over Newcastle?
I mean, it's Newcastle United all over, isn't it? You know, you're desperate for every single day. You're praying that Mike Ashley sells the club, and then you wake up one morning and you hear the news that there's been an offer. But guess who? You know, it's 80% shareholder by a Saudi-backed consortium. So it's I think for a lot of Newcastle fans, it's mixed emotions. I think everybody, including myself, is just so desperate for the club to change ownership, and the reality is, it's not no pun intended, but it's not a simple black or white issue, you know, in the sense that, you know, I don't think football fans, especially at a club like Newcastle, can be expected to carry the weight of the political significance of this takeover. I think football fans are there to support their club, to support the football team, and there's only we shouldn't be responsible for the politics behind it as such. So it's conflicting emotions, but the prospects are simply incredible when you think about it.
I woke up this morning, Gareth Bale is no longer a Manchester United target for every single transfer window. He's your man.
I'm just Kylian Mbappe, Koulibaly, you name it. It's all going to Newcastle next summer.
I know. I'm just waiting for Pochettino to sign. I can't wait.
Talk a little bit more about Mike Ashley there, Conor, if you don't mind. Just how long has he been at the club now? About 10 years, is it?
Well, so this is 13 years of a soulless shelling out of the football club.
Because when he took over, he was very popular with the fans. I think I remember him standing in the crowd with his black and whites on, you know, singing away.
Yeah, no, he fully embraced it, and I think the fans fully embraced him. I think it's no Newcastle fan, in my opinion, can be blamed for that, because we were bankrupt, we were skint at the time. We'd been very poorly run for a long time as well before that. However, it went from sort of, you know, famine to feast. From feast to famine with Ashley taking over, and very soon, I think, once he realised that fans were going to very quickly criticise him for poor decisions, I think all of a sudden he changed his tune quite quickly and became very actually malicious towards the club and the fan base, without a doubt, in my opinion, anyway.
And one thing is, every year, and it always seems to be around transfer window time, it sounds like there's going to be a new takeover at Newcastle. This is more concrete. This is going to happen.
This definitely has legs. It is legitimate. However, we have entered this period of radio silence that is very, very common with takeover hype around Newcastle. You know, it happened this time last year. It happened with a consortium from the UAE, and it all seemed to be going great. There was lots of Twitter coverage coming out of the Middle East, and all of a sudden it went dead, and we never heard of it again. And then we start the season with Ashley still running the club. So I'm personally, I think a lot of fans as well aren't actually going to believe it's happening until it has officially been done and he's on a helicopter out of that place.
There, and the Sports Direct signs are getting ripped down from the rafters.
Oh, absolutely, and rightly so. It'll be a celebration of a liberation of the club.
Before it becomes the Saudi Airways Stadium.
Exactly, I know. It's better the devil you know, as they say. But yeah. I think it will be just like Newcastle's DNA. It will be from one extreme to another, and you know, it's reported to be believed will be the richest club in the world. So,
by some way, 10 times richer than Man City if it goes through.
I mean, it's sort of the case of, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. In terms of the money.
Without, I don't know. I don't want this to come across in the wrong way. Now, obviously, there are all sorts of ethical issues with the Saudi consortium, but at the same time, Mike Ashley is the owner of Sports Direct, and he's a notorious capitalist who's made too much money off the back of hard work of vulnerable people around the world.
Yeah, without a doubt. So no, you're very, very right, Rafe, in saying that. I think anybody, and it's been highlighted, and rightly so. It's good to see that has been highlighted quite significantly over the last couple of years when the pressure's been really applied to Ashley, that of his breaches of of workers' rights, and you know his kind of how he generates his financial empire as such, as you said, exploiting people. And he exploits Newcastle United as a footballing institution. It's a free advert for his advertising for Sports Direct, and very, very much so. When he took over the club, he gave us a loan of about £180 million. However, you know that was something that we had to repay to him, even though he was plugging the holes for the debt that was owed at the time. So nothing with him is free, and nothing with him is genuine. So it will be fantastic to see him go.
How long do you think it'll take you to be really competing as a football club if this takeover comes through? Because with City, they were taken over, and then it was Europa League, and then it was one season in the Champions League. And
there
then
are financial fair play regulations as well to be considered.
There are, and after this, we might see more of them. I'm just wondering how, like, if you could be as realistic as possible, Conor, what do you think is going to happen if this goes ahead?
Ahead of Arsenal.
Well, it's fascinating, Joe. That good question, because as you pointed out, when Man City were taken over, I think they stuck with Mark Hughes, wasn't it? Who was the manager then?
For the first season, yeah,
first season. And then when you look at their purchases, there was no general plan as to what sort of players to purchase. It was very much just, here's money, go and spend as much as you can on whoever you want. So it all comes down to.
Is that part of the growth of the club, though, in terms of the growth of the global image of the club, that the first thing you've got to do is get these superstars into your club to announce your presence, to start generating that revenue. People suddenly start reading about you, buying your shirts.
It's a good point.
You have to buy Robinho. That's what you have to do first. You have to go and spend £30 million on Robinho.
Drag him out of a strip club in Rio de Janeiro and get him on.
Yeah.
But no, it's a very good point, Rafe. Absolutely. Like, without a doubt, there's a commercial agenda to all of these things. Like, I don't think the Saudis are buying Newcastle for the love of the club. It's there's a commercial venture for every foreign investor and domestic investor in the Premier League. So I think, like, the frustrating thing for me is that the way I view and love football is that there doesn't need to be such an excess of cash within the game. I think Liverpool, to a greater extent, have shown that good player recruitment and a good scouting network will bring you results. Sheffield United proved it, and I think Rafa Benitez as well, with his shoestring budget under Mike Ashley, showed that it doesn't take a whole lot to be able to compete. So it's all about how you invest. That's the bottom line for me.
Yeah. Arsene Wenger did it for a while as well before he lost his touch, but he was pretty good at while Manchester United had a lot more money than Arsenal, he was pretty good at sniffing out deals. And you're right, Liverpool is a great example of having a fantastic scouting network who have the will and the desire to go and buy players who have just been relegated with clubs like Gini Wijnaldum and Andrew Robertson, and players who are down the table like Virgil van Dijk, and then turn them into superstars just because they have such faith in these players.
They also have the ability to ship their dead weight for ridiculous sums of money.
For well more, Dominic Solanke, £20 million.
Jordan
Ibe, £15 million. That's Bournemouth twice, isn't it?
Would you argue that that's just market inflation as it is?
Yeah.
It is market inflation. They're young English players, but players coming from top Premier League clubs go for a premium. So once you've got a club, a traditional top 6 club on your CV, you're going to demand a higher wage.
True.
But Liverpool do have a special knack of getting ridiculous money for these guys. No one else is doing it. No one else is out there getting 20 million for reject third string players. Like,
but it's not just Liverpool's reserve players. Felipe Coutinho was sold for £140 million.
Yeah, that's very good.
Come on, that is an insane amount. He's not worth half that.
Do you know
he wasn't worth half that
into the team now either?
No, he wouldn't.
He was only bought because of the everything, the merry-go-round, the Neymar merry-go-round. But in that, Ousmane Dembele was bought for a ridiculous sum of money. And if you look at how Dortmund have rebuilt their team with that Dembele money, it's absolutely staggering.
I think I saw that over the weekend because the Bundesliga was back. He was sold for something like 90 million. And in that time, they got Sancho and someone else.
Yeah,
and
Haaland, Hummels.
I think for £60 million, they got Julian Brandt, Torgan Hazard, and
Erling Braut Haaland.
Erling Braut Haaland. That's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous.
I think for me as well with the Premier League, there's a culture of instant results that has really taken over the league, and I think what for me was a breath of fresh air was Chris Wilder's Sheffield United team with players he brought from League One being able to compete in the top half of the Premier League.
Yeah,
and it goes to show what a development approach can do for you.
Swansea
City
did something
there was
very
a
similar.
roadmap there from Swansea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very good point. I think certainly the Bundesliga, Dortmund was an excellent example there of how they are time is more on their side, in the sense of managers that have a bit more time to invest in players in terms of development and build a team. Whereas in the Premier League, managers don't have that, and then most managers are replaced by one of the old boys, your Allardyces, your Moyes, etc. You know,
it's funny because you see lots of young German managers now starting to be recruited by Premier League owners, and they're thinking, oh yeah, you know, this guy, he must be onto something. You know, they're doing something right in Germany. I'll get him in. But actually, what they're doing is just giving the managers more time, and they're succeeding as a result of that being given to them, not because they're
ingraining a culture
geniuses.
in a way of playing.
Exactly, like look at Bournemouth with Eddie Howe as well. You know, someone who's been given time. So
they just finish here to here, same this points range to that points range. He's consistent.
Sean, I distinctly remember you saying they were going down this year.
Yeah, I certainly said that. I think that he might have stayed too long at this stage. He should have gone for the Everton job when it was last on offer.
It's not a bad show.
They haven't progressed. They've stagnated a little bit.
In fairness, they looked as bad as I've ever seen them at times this season. I thought they were appalling. But would you agree that maybe for clubs like Bournemouth, the aim has to be after a certain number of years staying in the league and stabilising, it has to be a trophy?
Talk to Stoke City about that.
Swansea did that.
Stoke got too big for their boots as well.
Stoke far too early.
Yeah, Charlton got too big for their boots and they went right down the leagues. Like there's a very fine line. I think that you have to. Do you know what? I don't think Bournemouth have ever finished in the top 10. I think that you have to move, and Stoke I think might have finished in the top 10 only once. I think there's a big difference between finishing 13th, 14th, 15th, and finishing 7th, 8th, 9th. You have to look to make that jump up to a consistent top half team first.
Do you think more clubs should be looking to emulate Roberto Martinez's Wigan, winning the FA Cup even though they got relegated? Do you think that?
No, nobody should look to emulate that.
No.
I disagree. I think the FA Cup's a great competition. What's football about if not winning? How can you say that winning the FA Cup, the best domestic cup in England, it's the oldest trophy in the world? How is that a poor achievement for a club like Wigan?
Because they sacrificed everything and ended up in League One within 3 years.
They destroyed the football club.
Where did they come from? They came from League 2, League 1. They got to the Premier League. They won the FA Cup. They weren't in the Premier League for 10 years. They weren't. They were in the Premier League for 5 or 6 years, something like that.
I don't think so.
What's wrong with winning the FA Cup? I would choose that any day.
Nothing, but they're
getting relegated is the issue.
Instill a philosophy that clearly didn't suit the squad or the system, and great, it worked in the cup. They lost their place in the league.
But they were surviving. I remember Hugo Rodallega scoring a header in the last game of the season to keep them up the year before they went down. Like they were scraping by, and they got to win an FA Cup.
But what if clubs like that, who are naturally so limited in their budgets and their potential, what if they sacrifice the cups each season to stay up, and then they do so, but then the next season they go down and they've got nothing to show for it? Is that how clubs should be encouraged to exist, by the balance sheet?
No, absolutely not. Like the Wigan one, I think, is a bit of a freak occurrence.
But the devil's advocate.
Portsmouth won the FA Cup.
They did. Yeah. And Wigan was the odd one out, and Swansea winning the League Cup against Bradford in the final.
Birmingham won the League Cup, actually, Joe. I don't know if you remember that one.
They did. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, Hull almost won the FA Cup against Arsenal. But Arsenal won an
Aston Villa were against Arsenal in the final, but generally speaking, the big boys.
4-0. Yeah, to Arsenal, that one.
I heard a good suggestion the other day that the 6 English teams that qualify for Europe every season shouldn't be allowed to enter the following season's League Cup. Because it is a route to Europe as well. So assuming that those 6 teams are stable enough to go on and play in Europe, they shouldn't need that League Cup space to go on and do it again.
I'd be fine with that. I'd be very fine with that.
Yeah, but generally their spot then just goes into the league because they win it.
This is another thing. This is trying to give an incentive for clubs to take the domestic cup seriously, which they should in the first place. But I mean, I can't stand it when I see a small club put out their reserves.
But if you're competing against, if you know that eventually you're going to have to beat Manchester City or Liverpool or whoever it is in a final in Wembley,
what's the point? What's the point in playing anyway?
Well, that is genuinely people ask themselves, Joe.
That's the same for anyone. Like, think about it. If you're like if you're Liverpool in the Champions League or whatever, like, you know that you're going to have to come up, and you did last year, and you went and beat.
Joe, if you're a football manager and you've got a relegation 6-pointer on Saturday and you've got an away trip on Tuesday, in the League Cup, doesn't matter what stage, doesn't matter who you're playing against. You know that you're putting your players out there with the chance they might get injured, the chance they'll be fatigued for a competition that you know you're never going to win.
You don't know you're never going to win it.
You're likely not going to win.
These are the decisions you have to make as a football manager.
Yeah, you have to. Sorry, go ahead, Conor.
I was just going to say, if we took that approach of like 6 teams are omitted from the League Cup, firstly, in my opinion anyway, it's a degrading stance towards the Cup. And also, it's a case of, if those top 6 are then successful again in solidifying their European places, the divide financially and almost kind of, in a more psychological sense becomes greater, and then you have almost like a completely 2 separate leagues within a league.
You'd be helping them by giving them the Tuesdays and Wednesdays off in December.
Well, this is it, but then you also have to say, well, what if there's some good young British players in those bigger teams who need a run out in the cup competitions? And who's to say that a Man
those lads can go on loan like they always did?
They can, Rafe, absolutely. However, but who's to say though that we should discourage a good underdog story? I personally, I think that would be simply avoiding the problem of the gulf in financial power.
No, and I think that you're right. They have an interesting system in the States in the NFL where they have the draft every season, where they recruit all of the new college players coming in, and they give the first picks to the teams that finished lowest or had the worst results the season before. They have the same salary caps in place across all the teams, and the idea is that every season they want to try close that gulf from the season before. They want all of the fans of all of the teams going in thinking this is going to be our season. Not, Jesus, it'd be brilliant to finish 16th.
Yeah.
I think we're far too far gone for some of that.
But are we though? Like, does the introduction of a salary cap bring us somewhere?
No, salary cap would be great. I think.
Surely it's just about changing the culture and the mindset of the Premier League to not simply exist for the next kind of windfall of cash and TV rights, but to actually try and build something to achieve it. But
you say that, Conor, as we're here discussing phase 1, 2, and 3 of the training that's being forced out, and players are fighting against it, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic.
Wasn't the Premier League was founded to be this glamorous, ultra league? So it's a pure money league, right? Like that was the departure from the old Division 1, this creation, the birth of Sky Sports, if you will, alongside it.
Yeah.
And it's just grown exponentially from there. I just can't foresee a time where money is not. I don't know.
Be all and end all.
Can the Premier League exist in its current form with a salary cap?
Probably not.
It's like in the United States of America. It's like in the United States of America as it exists as a socialist state.
Joe, Liverpool made an outrageous amount of money last year. Enough to sustain all Premier League clubs for a decade. Like they could definitely sustain in the current model with a salary cap. Yes, they could definitely. Provided the other top teams in Europe and across the world brought in the same salary cap, so that people couldn't say, right, I'm finished with the Premier League, the Chinese Super League is the place to be, or the MLS is the place to be, or the French League is the place to be, wherever it is.
What's the salary cap going to be, though?
Like if it fell under UEFA's jurisdiction of, okay, there's a salary cap.
FIFA can just say that football players cannot earn in excess of £100,000 a week. There's a great start.
That's probably a fair amount, actually, I have to say.
Yep. Tell them. From 5 years' time, from the end of all contracts, no new contracts can be negotiated at a higher rate than $100,000 a year or $100,000 a week.
15 years ago, I think you'd be very hard pushed to find people earning £100,000 a week through football.
Yeah. It's only going to get bigger, though.
Well, wasn't there that controversy with the Chelsea players like Terry and Lampard, who were one of the first to be $100K a week, and no one could believe it, and then before we knew it,
everyone was doing it.
That was a base wage, yeah. So
and you get Mesut Ozil coming in $350,000.
I think it's the financial restructuring of certainly English football after this coronavirus pandemic is going to be something that's going to have to be looked at. It's going to be unavoidable. But then also, how can we through that try and regulate competition within the Premier League? You know, because in the Championship, every season you don't know what's going to happen.
It's the toughest league.
There's incredible excitement down there, but in the Premier League, I think it's all about the brand, isn't it? And if the brand is predictable, no one's going to watch it.
Yeah. But has the brand become predictable?
Well, there you go, Joe.
This is certainly something. I mean, when's the last time that the top six wasn't what it's become known as?
Leicester City are currently second, aren't they? Or are they third? Third.
Man City, I think.
This season's thrown up a couple of surprises, but I mean,
and now it's going to get scrapped off, and the record books will never show that it wasn't predictable.
And next, I mean, you're guaranteed that at least 4 of the top 6 are going to be in the top 6, right? The big 6 is there.
Yeah, you could pick the big 6, and you'll have 4 of them up there.
Well,
5, really.
You've got Everton spending a lot of money with Carlo Ancelotti involved. Give them a couple of years. You've got Newcastle potentially being taken over by Saudi owners. Give them a few years. You've it could come to a point where the Premier League might actually be more equal than we could ever dream of, but not through bringing teams down. But you eventually you'll have 20 teams or 30 teams in England that are all run by multimillionaires that pump.
Following that model.
But what we're saying now, just then, Rafe, though, goes against what you've just said, because we should be trying to bring the spending down.
You want to bring it up.
I would be in favour. I would be in favour of bringing the spending down, but if you look at who's currently running the UK and who's in charge, I think it would be far more likely that foreign investors will be encouraged to come in and pump money into football, because all of these footballers pay tax, all of the football clubs pay tax. The Premier League generates a massive amount of revenue for the UK.
Yeah. It does. Do you know? Sorry to interrupt. This summer, and the lack of funds available for a lot of clubs is going to be a real test, first for the football directors and scouts as to what deals they can do, and then if they realize that they've actually been successful, then why not move away from this insane model that we've seen in the Premier League of spending, you know, in some cases well over 100 million pounds a year every single summer on new players.
Never mind agent fees and wages and
exactly. Why not move towards something more sustainable? I mean, for ourselves right now, it's not like we're able to go out to the pub and restaurants and stuff like that. Like, everyone's learning to live a little bit differently and spend their money a little bit differently, and you know, spend less money. So I think the same is going to translate into football, and maybe it's going to be a good thing. It'd be nice to see clubs actually come away thinking that they've had a really successful transfer window through swap deals and free transfers, and that maybe we can move away from, you know, the Neymar deals and things like that, which is just, it's a shocking amount of money.
The other thing that I will say, kind of in argument to what I said about the NFL a couple of minutes ago, is that the players don't really have a choice in where they go. So these kids come out of college and they're told, you are going to go work in this part of the world for the next 3 years. Like, you know what I mean? You can't say, oh, well, you know, I grew up in London. I've always been a West Ham fan. You know, I came through the academy at West Ham. You know, like, West Ham is in my blood. Oh, sorry, mate, you're going to go play for Newcastle this year. Like, we can't dehumanize players, I don't think, in the same way that they're dehumanized in the NFL either, because there's all sorts of issues with player welfare and safety. They are just pawns in the States, and I don't think that's where we want to go in the Premier League either. But I don't.
Yeah. We are like that in football.
It almost brings us full circle on what we're saying about one being for against training and phase 1, phase 2. They so unanimously, they've all said yes to going back to training. It's once you start coming into the contact, that's where apparently there's a lot of division between squads at the moment. That's what the Premier League meetings are showing up, which is a really interesting battle in itself. Like, I think I heard the point being made on Sky over the weekend. It's like, oh yeah, I can go into a match contact, but I've already been training with these lads from my own squad in contact, and half of them I don't trust, because we've already heard plenty of stories about different people breaking lockdowns and things in different clubs. And then the Premier League is still just pushing it on as if they're pawns, as Rafe says there.
Windsor, I think if you look at the money that clubs are potentially going to have to pay back to broadcasters if this season is cancelled,
I think that's been ruled out. I think they've been given assurance. Now, I think from Sky, they've been given assurances. I don't know what the overseas deal. I know that's very heavy as well. I think it must be near $1 billion. I think that's some of the numbers being shown around. I don't know 100% the overseas deal. I think Sky have said broadcast money stays as is.
I see.
Because Sky and the Premier League, as Joe's touched on, they're one off each other.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, BT Sports as well.
It's UK deals, I think, are staying in place.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, good. Well, that lessens the pressure.
But the overseas deal is obviously the heavy one, so I don't know what that would do for them. So maybe that's another reason. It's like, hey, Premier League, let's push it out. But since we went full circle, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Thank you for joining us, Conor.
Oh, thanks
to obviously our veterans for being here.
Thanks for having us, Sean. Thank you so much for coming on, Conor. It was great.
Yeah, thanks
for that.
Great to see your faces again.
Yes, absolutely. All the best.
Take care, lads.